Well, what a day. Perhaps you're just reeling from the news that The Nightmare Begins and Devil's Planet have been returned to the BBC. Now, a warning, the content herein is not new, as is evidenced by the fact that the special guest is the late Ian K McLachlan. Boy, would he have loved today. But let's not dwell on loss on this day of findings. I just thought it would be nice to repackage my two commentaries on episodes 1 and 3 of the Daleks Master Plan as a sort of taster to whet our appetites. So what you're about to hear is me watching a recon of the Daleks Master Plan episode 1, The Nightmare Begins, because at the time of recording, that's all we had. At the time of recording this new preamble to, as I say, otherwise a repeat, we have the episode, and I have seen the episode. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for that now. In fact, and that's not me gatekeeping, I actually think, and from my own experience, it will be nice to come to the episode for you lot sight unseen. You don't want me to say, oh, and look out for this bit and look out for that bit, because I had the privilege of watching it unfold in front of my eyes with no knowledge of what it would actually be like, bar my own speculation, born of things like this. And it was a joyful experience, and I want you to experience that too. I've been very lucky to be involved in the return of this episode. I did nothing useful. I did nothing to help get it back, but I was advising Film is Fabulous on various aspects of Doctor Who, and of course doing things like helping to select clips for news packages and things like that. And as I record this a couple of days ago, I lured Peter Purvis to Leicester in order that he be among the very first to see these episodes. He didn't know what he was coming to see. He thought he was just doing a sort of press junket about 1960s television. So there'll be plenty of content, I do hate that word, to come, and lots of speculation. But as I've sort of been there and seen it and done it, I thought it would be nice to get something out quickly that savours and speculates. There'll be loads of things that I muse about this episode that I'm sure will be completely wrong, and some key bits that I can't even anticipate. I know, because there are bits within the episode that you simply don't know are there until you see it. And I'll also release episode 3 in this way, probably in the next couple of days. But other than that, as I say, what follows is completely unedited from the first time that this went out. So if there are topical references or bits that don't sort of capitalise upon the fact that this episode is now back, it's because this episode is a relic of the past, just a mere representation of something that we now actually have. And one day soon, I'm sure I'll do a commentary on the moving episode. But for now, let's go back in time to a few years ago when Ian K McLachlan, the late Reverend Ian K McLachlan, one of the earliest of Doctor Who fans and royalty in so many ways, and such a nice man. He would have been so pleased today. I hope he's looking down and seeing the earth all aglow with the news that the nightmare is about to begin again. So enjoy this trip down memory lane, and come back soon for Devil's Planet when I do that. There'll be a bit of a gap, probably a couple of days, and 97 is now 95, and this is one of those two that made one number turn into the other. Oh, what a lot of fun. What a time to be alive. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Haydock, get a Doctor Who fan to choose a story and to tell me their favourite things about it, but not before I've tried to guess what those might be. Well, I've only gone and done it. I've decided to do... welcome to Happy Times and Places. My name is Toby Haydock, and I'm about to watch a Doctor Who story. I'm about to watch a Doctor Who story that largely doesn't move because of the resources available, That's when it does move, it's in black and white, so it moves at a slightly different pace from the television we're used to today, and is also just in terms of it's the movement of the storytelling takes place over 12 episodes, a record, right up until certainly a record when I first came to be aware of it in about 1983, when I got the Doctor Who Radio Times 20th Anniversary Special, the book Doctor Who A Celebration, where I first became aware of stories like the Daleks' Master Plan. And that's around the time I also started sniffing around, writings about Doctor Who, and in fact, probably in a Doctor Who A Celebration, because I think there's a quote from a letter to William Hartnell to the fan Ian K McLachlan, so his name was a bit legendary. He's had a letter from William Hartnell, and that is who, because I've had the pleasure of meeting him only a handful of times at conventions and do's and things like that, but he's a name that it's a bit of a that is a bit reverent, and I think he is a reverend as well. I think Ian is a man of the cloth. But also a great Doctor Who historian. If you're listening to this, there will be a video version much later. It takes me a while to do those. And you want to imagine the voice, the face of the voice we're about to hear. Ian very much has the aspect of a cheerful Gandalf, a gnomic Gandalf, so you're missing out on the visuals. The reason I'm doing this intro is because Ian's intro into, I ask all of my guests to to introduce themselves and to sort of give a vague, notion of why they've chosen the story, and then we go through the story one episode at a time, and at the end of each episode, after I've watched it, I will have chosen my favourite thing about the episode, and Ian will have chosen his. But Ian's introduction, because I had to check if it worked, and so I don't listen to the reasons, but one of the reasons to have the introduction is so that I can make sure that the clips work and that everybody knows what they're doing. So I've listened to Ian's introduction, and it's he goes into quite some detail and a bit of his historical perspective, which is very handy and very interesting. But it means it's a slightly longer. It's going to take us 7 minutes or so before we get into the episode itself. So that just might be a culture shock for regular listeners. But the beauty of this is each person responds to this challenge in their own way. And some people, give silly reasons. Some people give jokey reasons. Some people go into a lot of detail. Some people go into very short detail. And Ian gives us a big old lead in. But as I say, I have great admiration for these fans who were there right back at the beginning and who began the process of chronicling Doctor Who, of tracking down the program makers, and of getting some of that testimony before it was too late, and for helping to shape our understanding of these brilliant, dark, early, unreachable days of Doctor Who. So let's go over now to the special guest for this episode, fan of yore, Ian McLachlan.
Hello, I'm Ian McLachlan. I have been watching Doctor Who since the very first episode, but I didn't see the original broadcast of it. I saw the repeat on the 30th of December 1963. And after I saw the first episode, I was hooked on the show and I had to see every episode. So far, I've only missed one, which is the last episode, Assassin of Peking, of Marco Polo. I was involved in the Doctor Who fan club, which Keith Miller used to run a little bit. And then when the Doctor Who Appreciation Society started, I got involved in that. I produced Cosmic Mask for a few years and managed to interview some people from Doctor Who in the years in the 1980s. Although I would describe myself as a fan, I would have to say that my favourite period of Doctor Who history is definitely the 1960s, and in particular, the Hartnell years. So when I was asked to choose a story that I could help Toby with his project, I immediately wanted a Hartnell one, and I was delighted when I found the Dalek Master Plan was still available to talk about. The Dalek Master Plan, I remember bits of it. I remember more than other bits. But I would say that it was the kind of Doctor Who story I particularly liked, because other favourites of mine were Keys of Marinus and The Chase, which meant that the TARDIS didn't stay in the same place all the time, but kept moving to various locations. I liked that, and particularly the Dalek Master Plan, which had an episode in the past, the Egyptian bit of the story, as well as the future of Earth, and it had more aliens in these 12 episodes than I had ever seen before. It's very much an adventure story, and I always saw Doctor Who as one long continuing serial. It didn't change from that until the Pertwee era, when stories were, there was some distance between adventures, but I like the unfolding story. One episode followed the other, and it was a continuing story. So the Dalek Master Plan was exciting. It was a real adventure story. You didn't know what would happen, and it was made in the period that John Wiles was the producer. And if you ask me who my favourite producer of Doctor Who was, I would have to say it was John Wiles, although I had great respect for Verity Lambert, who started it all off. I think the third season is particularly interesting. The stories are a very wide range of stories, and you never knew what was going to happen next, particularly with stories like the Dalek Master Plan, when you didn't know from week to week who would actually survive. So it was a very exciting story to watch. I never thought it was over long in 12 episodes. And it's interesting that nowadays people think that one of the best Patrick Troughton serials was The War Games, which was 10 episodes. And for much of the 70s and 80s, the feeling was that The War Games was overlong. Nowadays, many people mention it as one of their favourites, if not their favourite, Patrick Troughton adventure. And The War Games was, in some ways, like the Dalek Master Plan, that it didn't stay in the same place or the same time, although that is an interesting way of putting it, because the different time periods were on the planet. But anyway, it moved around. It moved along. It was exciting. And that's what I'd want from a Doctor Who adventure. And the important thing is about the serials in these days is it was ended on a cliffhanger. Every episode virtually ended in a cliffhanger. Not all of them, but most of them. And that was one of the strengths of the programme, because it was like these old Saturday morning serials at the cinema, where you had an exciting adventure, and then it was climaxed to a cliffhanger, and then the cliffhanger was resolved. It's interesting that apparently Dennis Spooner wasn't very happy about what Terry Nation did at the end of Coronas of the Sun and the Feast of Stephen. But that's, again, a very interesting episode, quite unlike any other Doctor Who episode there were. And so that was part of the attraction. Another attraction with Dalek Master Plan was when we had returning aliens, i.e. the Daleks, in these early years, you didn't have a returning personality. There was a thought at one time that Ian and Barbara would make a cameo appearance at the end of the massacre. But that didn't happen, sadly. But there were you didn't get a returning character until the meddling monk, very interesting and amusing character, turned up quite unexpectedly in the Daleks Master Plan. So you had that, which was very unusual. And then the Dalek Master Plan overall had Mavic Chen, and I believe that Kevin Stoney won a special award for his playing of that particular character. A very interesting character, a very devious character. He wasn't interested in anything but himself. So that's the Dalek Master Plan. It was finally, the scripts were published in a two book set, and it was written by John Peel, which we had to wait a wee while till we got the master plan, but it was well worth reading. And the sad thing about that master plan is there are only 3 surviving episodes, and the episodes, all 3 of them, I think, show you what an interesting and well written and well performed serial that was. To me, while The Keys of Madness will always be my favourite William Hartnell serial, I would say that the Dalek Master Plan was my second.
So thanks to Ian. It's McLachlan, isn't it? So I've already done him the disservice of pronouncing his name wrong. Fancy miss it. The one episode you miss of season 1 is the final episode of Marco Polo, which is the one story from season 1 that doesn't exist at all. Bless. So look, I've got a cup of tea. You might have just heard me sup that. I will try and keep slurping to a minimum because I know that's not desirable in the audio medium. I'm going to start an epic journey. The nightmare is about to begin. So I am watching the loose cannon reconstruction. I'm sure there are other ways to consume this episode. And I am going to press play. And the episode will begin in 3, 2, 1. So the Daleks' master plan. Well, it took a while to kick in. That's the nature of the beast here. So yes, the Daleks' master plan. I remember when I first read about it in either the Radio Times 20th anniversary special or Doctor Who Celebration. They were the 2 big educators of fans of my generation when it was Doctor Who's 20th anniversary and stuff really kicked in to mark that and it's what that year is what transformed me from being. Well, I still think I was pretty into it, but I think that sudden realization that there was a history. Well, I knew from the Target books there were old stories, but there was a history to mine and to imagine, and beyond those stories that were available through the Target books, was it and I learnt about characters like Katerina, companions like Katerina. Now, I don't think she's really a companion. She joins at the end of the Mythmakers. But we'll get into that. But yes, this epic. And I think in Doctor Who Celebration it says one of the longest Doctor Who stories and one of the best. Value judgments were actually few and far between. It was largely seen as most Doctor Who was pretty good. I mean, Doctor Who Celebration is a bit mean about the gunfighters and says the Space Pirates is slow. The Underwater Menace and the Android Invasion are suggested to be a bit subpar, but otherwise it's pretty much everything's ace. I love the sound effects of the jungle. I love Charlo Charlo Egan instead of Charlie Charlie Echo. I believe that Douglas Camfield was responsible for turning some of Terry Nation's 20th century dialogue and nomenclature, the names, into that thing about consonantal shift. So there's characters later, aren't they, called Lizanne and Roald, who Ronald and Lisa. I'm with Camfield here. It's a much better. It just suggests the slight change of language, and we can see that happen. I can see spellings of names that were spelt in a fairly standard way when I was younger, and now there are various different variations. Presumably, that's as parents who like the sound of a name but don't know how it's spelt, and that's actually true. I remember my mum was a health visitor, and she saw this. This name on a certificate, and she said, "Oh, what's your child called?" And it was Shayn, and it's like, well, Shane. It's like the name was Shane, but it was Shayan. Shayan is because they'd heard the name in Neighbours, so they thought it was Shayan. They thought it was Shayn because of the Australian twang with which they'd heard it pronounced, and they'd liked the name, and so that's how they thought it was spelt. So that sort of thing can happen. So. Although Roald is a name, Roald Dahl, of course. but he was Ronald. Here he is, played by Philip Anthony, an actor who had a long career and was in around this time of year a few years ago a BBC Day of the Triffids, so kept going and playing decent parts on telly. And he died, as I record this, in 2021. He died last year, I think. And was still doing signings and entertaining. I never had the pleasure of meeting him myself, but he was still active, still acting. And Lisa, or Lisanne, is played by Pamela Grier, whose real name is Luciania Grier. She is the widow. She was married to John Carson, who plays Ambril in Snake Dance, and she is a writer now based in Africa. John and his wife. I chickened out then, didn't I? Just because I didn't double check. Luciania. Anyway, apologies. She won't be listening. I got quite friendly with John, but I never met his wife. And they moved back to England for a bit, and then they went back to Africa. He loved that country, that continent. Sorry. Michael Guest is playing the interviewer, interviewing Marvick Chen, Kevin Stoney, and on this reconstruction, they have a sort of to represent Michael Guest. They've got a screenshot of him playing a Saxon in the Time Meddler, as he does. He was an extra in Quatermass in the Pit, actually, and sort of plays small parts in all sorts of things. I think he's a Mongol bandit as well, isn't he? In Marco Polo, but I suspect he didn't look like a Saxon in the Time Meddler when he was interviewing Marvick Chen, but it doesn't matter. I like this big screen that they have, and I believe that the way that was shot gave a certain kind of effect. I think they put a bit of effort into that, and we know how ambitious Douglas Camfield was with the visuals, and I think that's what we miss when we see this, because of course John Wiles is now the producer of Doctor Who, and pretty much the first thing he does when he takes over, Verity Lambert hands over to him sort of during Galaxy 4, and immediately John Cura's telesnaps cease to be part of the production and only begin again when Ennis Lloyd takes over the reins. So, and unfortunately, whilst we probably could have access to telesnaps of many episodes that do exist, the Wiles era is largely missing, and also is not represented by telesnaps, which makes imagining and indeed, as Luce Cannon have done here, recreating the Daleks master plan and various stories of season 3, which I think is one of the most bold and imaginative seasons in the whole of Doctor Who, and certainly one of the most varied. Rather difficult. So thanks, John Wiles, although not to take away the fact that he was quite ambitious in the stories he wished to tell, in the styles of stories. And season 3 is, I think, very grown up in terms of its sort of philosophy and its depiction of certain things. The Daleks master plan is interesting, and I'm interested in this journey that we will take. I love all of this space security agent stuff, the spooks, the X-Files, the sort of slight conspiracy theory, the idea that there's an Earth government and secret agents, and with names like Kurt Gantry and Brett Vion. I love all of that. I find all that sort of Terry Nation-y stuff, although I think they maybe had different names. Brett Vion was originally definitely not called Brett Vion, Nation was still good at names. He quite often used Germanic names, Kurt Gantry, that have a harshness or a slightly grown upness. I think if you've grown up with sort of Second World War comic books and things like that, which is why he has his Dortmunds, doesn't he, and names like that. Everybody has pretty good names, I think, in the Nation stuff, which is why, where there's a weakness, where I think Ronald and Lisa and then Camfield comes in and helps out. I think between them, that it means that all the names are pretty cool here. Brian Cant playing Kurt Gantry, very interesting for me as a kid, because by the time I had become cognizant of Brian Cant, he was a very cheerful, ubiquitous face in children's television. So then when I was reading get out or I'll kill you now, he says. And I believe, because there's a memo that exists in studio, as they are here, in a slightly different beard from the one he has on film in the material that still exists. But yes, it starts very dramatically. You've got these two guys. One of them's injured, and he says to the other one, go off or I'll kill you, and it's all. And Brett doesn't say anything. I love it, and I'm a real sucker for that. I'll stay behind. You go on. I mean, and in fact, I think I've probably mentioned this before because somebody on my Patreon alluded to the fact that I must have, that's the way I want to go out, to stay behind and give everybody else time to escape. That's the way I want to go. So if that could be arranged, or to stay on the alien spaceship to crash it into the other alien spaceship while everyone else goes on the escape pods, but I'll stay to make sure it happens, to make sure nothing goes wrong, to hold off the guards or whatever. So we now have a piece of film, a glorious piece of film, which I first saw dubbed with "I'm going to spend my Christmas with a Dalek," the song, because that's how it appeared on Doctor Who: The Early Years, a video cassette. Daleks: The Early Years, which had the Dalek Master Plan episodes and all the missing clips all the existing clips from the missing episodes. So and I remember, that was really exciting when this film stuff from episodes 1 and 2 turned up. And you see that automatically shows, when we've got the moving pictures, Camfield's angle with the Dalek there, the close up on the gun, the sweat on Brian Cant's face, even that wobbly cheek thing that he goes on, the fear and the drama is never far away when Camfield is directing, which means he's perfect for this, what I would call, and I know it's a slightly archaic phrase, but the boy's own kind of adventuring stuff, which is, as I say, one of my favourite aspects of the Daleks Master Plan, as are the sounds we can hear now, these sort of unnatural jungle caterwauls that are the work of Brian Hodgson, who is a great contributor to the weirdness of the Hartnell era, and I think the Hartnell era is the weirdest era of Doctor Who, in that space and planets, and here we do have a shot of the TARDIS appearing on film, so that's another bit we have of the Dalek Master Plan. And I think that was first shown to me in a documentary called Resistance is Useless, that largely made me furious because it had a talking anorak, and showed, said things like, the show prides itself on its special effects for little money, and then showed the Scarrison, which was a special effect even the production team at the time had not been happy with. And you go, just don't take the piss. It's easy. You can either do a celebratory one, or you can take the piss. Why take the piss when this is supposed to be heralding a season of repeats? It's actually counterproductive, but also it's lazy and it's cheap. So I was furious. Although actually I noticed today I am actually Facebook friends with the voice of the anorak. I should interview him, Steve Steen. We know each other through because the world of comedy. Although I don't think I've actually met Steve, but we are online mates and we have conversed online, not about the anorak. And I don't blame him; he just took a voiceover job. But I do want to punch that anorak and probably repeatedly kick it in the balls, every person in charge of making the decisions for that documentary, which was well put together and hadn't missing clips on. But don't take the piss, come on. And I say that as a stand-up comic. Anyway, let's not digress. So this is a great... And The Nightmare Begins is a title that suggests, oh yeah, we know we're at the start of an epic. I sort of feel sorry for John Wiles, because I know that he and his script editor, Donald Tosh, did not want to do this story. They weren't wild about the Daleks. And I think this almost finished them off, so that we don't then get many stories of the kind that they would have liked to have done, because they both leave. So I would have been really interested to see more of Wiles and Tosh. The picture on the screen now that I have is the one from the Radio Times, I think, of Katerina mopping Stephen's brow, and I believe it's one of the mysteries of Doctor Who is, when does Stephen change into the corduroy jacket we see him in later, and when does he change out of his Trojan gear? Presumably that's between episodes, but I don't know. But there is an issue with Stephen's clothes, because of this picture that we have from the Radio Times that otherwise doesn't exist. So I wonder if there are more photos kicking around from the Daleks Master Plan, episode 1. It's always nice when a cache of photos turns up from stories that are poorly represented. And I mean, I remember being shocked, of course, when I learned about missing episodes, and you'd go, well, at the Dalek Master Plan, there's 12 episodes, and Doctor Who Celebration says it's one of the best Doctor Who stories ever. And then in Doctor Who Celebration, at the back, it's got the list of missing episodes. You got, what? There are none. But then the Radio Times 20th Anniversary special had a list of missing episodes, but it listed them by their individual titles. It didn't break them up into stories. So if you didn't know what the stories, you could sort of guess that Assassin at Peking was Marco Polo, you could get. But when it got to the Daleks Master Plan, it seemed to, the Nightmare Begins seemed to be the beginning of that. Oh, and it followed from Mission to the Unknown. So you got to the Nightmare Begins, but then there were only 10 episodes listed. So I actually wrote to the BBC, and instead of saying, I said there, these episodes I think are the ones from the Daleks Master Plan. Does that mean 2 have been found? Blah, blah, blah. And I only found it, and they just wrote back and said, we haven't got any lists. Here's the general thing that the production team sends out. And it was, it was a thing from the Doctor Who production team that had agents' addresses of the actors, and it was a standard thing that was sent out, which was still thrilling to get. But I really wanted to know about missing episodes, even though there was never a chance of seeing even episodes that existed at that point. But so, yeah, the 20th anniversary special from the Radio Times and Doctor Who Celebration that came out around about the same time both had different information about what was missing from the Daleks Master Plan, because the 2 episodes that were the first to come back of this story had come back in between Celebration going into print and 20th anniversary special going into print. So I had a sort of tantalising, I'd got a theory, even though I didn't know for sure, because the 20th anniversary special hadn't broken it up into episodes. Hartnell has to do a lot of talking to himself, and he's very good at it, I have to say. Yeah, it's hard to do, and it's a bit phony, and it's, you try not to ask people to do it now. But Hartnell, because he's slightly dotty and hoots to himself, is rather good at it. Oh, is this where the spar lands as well? That was another thing that I think I saw in Resistance is useless. Oh no, that's just the noise of a spaceship moving over. But I remember that was footage that didn't exist, and I saw it. I knew it was the spar spaceship because I'd seen pictures. So I'd got an inkling that some film had come back from the Daleks Master Plan before it was reported. So I keep seeing bits of the Daleks Master Plan before I know that those bits are actually back. So hopefully I'll accidentally watch episode 12 by mistake one day somewhere. But yes, so it's a sort of epic, and of course leading on from Mission to the Unknown, which is like a trailer that I've offered to other people for this podcast separately. So I don't know who's going to do Mission to the Unknown, which I like very much. Was an episode that I was introduced to very early in the Doctor Who archive in Doctor Who magazine, but I didn't quite know what the archive was. I didn't know what archive meant. I thought it was called Doctor Who Achieves, and I didn't understand what this was, because it seemed to be a synopsis of a story that didn't have the Doctor in, and I didn't quite understand that, and there was no explanation. It just had the synopsis. So I learned much later. Obviously, it was a trailer. It's a sole episode without any of the TARDIS crew. But yes, so the TARDIS crew are Katarina, who for ages we had no moving footage of at all. And when I first read about Katarina, here she is. She, I thought she was she joined in the Mythmakers, it said. So I assumed she was a character in the Mythmakers who the Doctor took with him. But as with Dodo, who follows, the companion isn't actually part of the story that they join in. They just sort of wander in at the end. And I remember reading an interview with Adrian Hill where she said, oh yes, when I joined, it was lovely because other people were just leaving, like Max Adrian and Francis White, and I thought, well, they weren't leaving, they were the guest stars of that story. It's not like they were a companion like you who would join and who would leave. And I thought, and then it was only later that I realized, the reason she said They will leave because they actually were in as many episodes as her, pretty much, or not far off. Oh, there's a Varga plant. I mean, we didn't have photos of those for ages. The great sort of candy floss beasts of old Kemble Town. And I love this continuation of the Mark Corey story, the fact that we have Mark Corey's corpse and the recording. It really does feel like an epic. I love him sort of. I love the fact that he gets killed at the end of Mission to the Unknown, and now we have his skeleton. And I love the fact there's been a whole story in between. Oh, here's the spar. Look at that, brilliant. I love that, and I look at the way that the two different bits go around at two different speeds. That's an excellent model. It's an excellent ship. And I'm glad we can see it moving. That's a brilliant piece of work. And the Daleks look good in this. So I love all of this space conference stuff. I really like the idea, just in the expanded universe of Doctor Who, that we've had this solo adventure without the Doctor, and now the Doctor comes and catches up on what we know of from that little interlude that we had. And the idea that, Corey's corpse is a skeleton now and has that recording that he tried to send and couldn't. But now he's not going to have died in vain because somebody will hear his message. And it's nice that he and that adventure live on in the DNA of this. I really like that. And we haven't mentioned, of course, Brett Vion, Nicholas Courtney, who's great. And comes to the beginning of his association with Doctor Who, and I remember his picture being in Doctor Who: A Celebration. It's like, oh gosh, Nick the Brigadier was in Doctor Who before, so he really has worked with every Doctor, which he had at that point. And there's all sorts of funny little things in this episode. Yes, so there's the chair that immobilises Brett Vion. There's the business with the key in the lock, isn't there? Leaving the key in the lock. And it's a shame for Katerina that they sort of chickened out of having her. But, that debate as to whether she's a companion. She filmed her leaving scene first because it was done on film. I think she leaves her. So she was never taken on as a full-time character and then sort of axed, as it were. She was dead as soon as she began because she'd done the filming for Master Plan. As pretty much, I think, the first thing she did. And she's not listed in the Radio Times in the sort of companion billing. Now, the Radio Times sort of shifts about, but it's largely starring Doctor Who with the companions and then the guest stars, and then it starts starring Doctor Who with the guest stars and the companions. But Adrian Hill doesn't get companion billing at all in the Radio Times, and that's something that even Samantha Briggs, even Pauline Collins in the Faceless Ones gets for a couple of episodes. So, but she's infused in our collective memory as she is one of the companions, and it was exciting because she was one of the companions who died. Oh my God, there are companions who die, and they happen in the old-fashioned Hartnell era. Now, this is going to be... So that was quite an astonishing revelation as a kid. And then you discovered that actually the two companions who died, one was in essentially a third of one story, all right, and 10 minutes of the Mythmakers. And the other one is in just this story. So I always think it's a bit of a stretch. However, it's within our consciousness that Katerina and Sarah Kingdom are companions, in the same way it's within our consciousness that the Daleks is called the Daleks and the Edge of Destruction is called the Edge of Destruction and Mission to the Unknown is called Mission to the Unknown. And I won't hear from anyone otherwise. I didn't talk closely about the ins and outs of that episode. Well, I did a bit. I talked about the names. No, I'm fine. I'm not apologising. I don't care. There's a lot to say about the Daleks Master Plan. I should hope so, because I've got to watch the whole of it. I do like the way that it sets itself up as a continuation of Mission to the Unknown. That sort of special, the space service stuff that it has going on. The James Bond in space that Brett Vion is. I like the names. I love Mavic Chen. I mean, I will eulogise Kevin Stoney at many points throughout the next 12 episodes. Well, apart from Christmas. But my favourite thing of that, I think my favourite thing of that night, because Brian Hodgson's jungle music is jungle music. No, that's terrible. Not jungle music. Jungle sounds. Tight fit, aren't they? Going a wimber way, a wimber way. Is that what jungle music is? Is jungle music a genre of music? I don't know. But it's not what I meant. I meant jungle noises, alien caterwauling screeches and all of that, which I think are gorgeous and beautiful. And as I say, Brian Hodgson is one of the great undersung heroes of Doctor Who, particularly the work in the 60s, where I think the show has a very strange and unsettling approach to the way it tells stories of outer space. Outer space is dangerous and weird and strange and unsettling. And I think as we've got used to science fiction, the program makers have taken sort of alien worlds in their stride, whereas I think in the Hartnell era, they're not. They're still a bit weird and off-putting and slightly strange and I think it's partially because we can't touch and feel and see some of these episodes, and the pictures that we have are, we can't quite get a handle on what they look like, but it does. All the sets have slightly of some of their sci-fi stories in the Hartnell era. The alien trees are a sort of odd shape and they're a slightly weird thing, But I think the thing I am going to choose as my favourite thing for episode 1 is that this is a continuation of a mission to the unknown, and that we have this space security agents, and that we have Mark Corey's corpse, and that this feels like it's the beginning of an epic set in this sort of wider, big world of universe of galaxies and different planets and sort of scale. I like all of that. If Ian gets anywhere close to that, I'm going to have the point, but I suspect he won't, because it's quite a nebulous thing I've chosen.
So, I've been asked to say something about each episode, a particular highlight or a particular special fun something. We begin with The Nightmare Begins. What I like about this episode is it carries on where the previous Horse of Destruction left off. We have Katerina tending to an injured Stephen. It was a shock that Katerina suddenly appeared on the TARDIS in the previous episode, and it was a bit worrying that Stephen was injured, and could the Doctor help him? Could he find some way of helping him? William Hartnell's Doctor was many things. One of the things, he didn't get things right all the time, and he was looking for some way of helping his injured Stephen. And I thought it was interesting that Stephen was made better, not by the Doctor, but by Brett Vian. And what I like about this episode is the thing was the Doctor didn't come to the rescue in this one. It was Brett Vian.
I got really excited then when he said, the thing I like about this episode is that the continues on from, I thought he's going to say Mission to the Unknown, the Horse of Destruction, which it does. I mean, one of the things that was a big surprise to me when I first started, when I first saw a William Hartnell story, when I saw An Unearthly Child, is, that episode 4 ends with a cliffhanger into the next story, and it really was, an adventure in time and space. So, I suppose no surprise that it continues, but it continues very, very directly. And yes, and that's very true. That idea that Stephen is still injured from what happened in the previous story, again, gives a sort of connectedness between the stories and a sense of a continually flowing adventure, which does seem somehow more epic than perhaps the Doctor Who that I was used to, which is a story ends and you go on to the next one. And there's a few, interstory cliffhangers in the Davison era, but they were quite unusual. And again, I didn't quite realise that they were harking back to how things were done before. And yes, there was the E-Space trilogy that was sort of connected, but this still feels sort of interesting and strange to me, even though it predates the episodes that I know. So it's an interesting way of how they used to do things. So that's a good choice for me, and I was almost going to say I deserve a bit of a point for that, but then he started talking about it was Brett Vian that cured Stephen, which is a good point, and a lot of that interaction that I'm afraid I talked over, the interaction between those characters in the TARDIS. So I can't have a point, But I think Ian makes a very good point about the interconnectedness of the stories and the flow of it. It's a very good, strong first episode. So, the nightmare begins. It's aware it's on the way to an epic. If you've heard some sort of noise in the background, by the way, that is my dear friend and dog, Bernard, who's having a bit of a snore. So he's obviously decided that 12 episodes is not going to be his bag. So if you've heard a little bit of what sounds like an engine running down, that's a cockapoo in the land of Nod. Well, look, I will return with episode 2 of 12. We're in it for the long haul, people, of the Dalek Master Plan, in the company of the great Ian K McLachlan next time. But in the meantime, stay well, and thanks for watching or, as the majority of you do, listening. Goodbye now. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Ian K McLachlan. These commentaries would be impossible without the support of patrons, who include Philip Craggs, Richard Bignell, Chris Hyam, Frank Shales, Graham Cooley, Nick Tedston, Steve Manfred, Tom Neenan, Ronald Hayden, Jeff Walker, Richie, David Trainier, Ian Dean, Andrew Wilson, Ralph Chilton, Robin Bland, Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Stroll, David Anonymous, Jenny at Bluebox99, Paul Carrington, Paul Cook, Peter Crocker, Rob Dawson, Chris Dunford-Kelk, and everyone else who I will mention at another time. The music was by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. There is more revelling, including exclusive content about the return of the missing episodes of the Daleks Master Plan on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Toby Haydock. That's a place where for as little as £3 a month you can get advanced releases of podcasts, but also lots of exclusive behind-the-scenes material of the various Doctor Who-related things that I get up to, including surprising actors with the knowledge that something they were in 60 years ago has turned up again. And you can support my endeavours for as little as £3 a month. You also get your name read out on the credits, you get to join in with the podcasts, and you get all sorts of other goodies, usually 3 releases per week, and everything is available from the lowest tier. You can also support me at ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, where you can do one-off payments of any kind, and you can support me without having to put your hands in your pockets, which I understand in these financially tough times. And I'm just grateful to you for listening. I really am. By going to Spotify and Apple and iTunes and all the places, and my YouTube channel as well, and liking, subscribing, giving the thumbs up, and where you can, giving 5-star ratings. And if it's possible to do a few lines saying what you like about my output, that really does help with those accursed algorithms to which we are all beholden. Well, I'm all over social media, and my social media will also have stuff about the missing episodes. I've been making videos and sharing exclusive photos and all sorts of things. I have an Instagram at toby.haydock. I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock and at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on Blue Sky as well, and I have a Facebook page too. So go to all of those places as well. So, yeah, I've recorded a new ending. I thought that was probably wise. And, yeah, I've seen episode 1, and I'm not going to give you any spoilers, as I say, but it's great. It's a really good episode. It's taut. It's tense. It's tight. Douglas Camfield moves his camera really well. There's a real sort of rearguard action kind of World War II movie atmosphere about the whole thing. But there are some joyous surprise moments from William Hartnell. Katerina, I think and I hope, will be reevaluated as a result of this. We get much more of an angle on her character because she sort of floats through episode 2 a bit, doesn't she? But with this, we have and episode 3 as well. We kind of have her journey, and it is like she is sort of transferring from one realm to the next. She's slightly sort of detached, but I think she's charming. I think she's rather beguiling. Nick Courtney, so handsome. Seeing him and Brian Cant face off is quite extraordinary because they're both different kinds of TV legends. Oh, there is so much fun to be had, let alone the fact that Liz Ann's hair is very different to what I expected. I mean, little touches all over the place. I promise you, there are no duff moments. There's no slightly badly orchestrated bit, no camera clunks, no bit that make you go, oh, did they? Oh, I hope nobody walks in now. There, it's really solid. It's really good. It's a good episode of Doctor Who. Aren't we lucky?